Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining Fastlane's webinar, Passing the CICD 210-60 exam. My name is Lee Phillips, and this is webinar number 5 of our Cisco Certification Collaboration Series. Today's presenter is Mr. Joey DeWiel. If you viewed any of our previous webinars, you'll know that Joey has a multitude of experience with Cisco systems and their collaboration applications. He has delivered standard Cisco certification training to thousands of administrators and engineers while designing and deploying custom courses for different enterprises. Joey has also been the principal developer of lab environments and lab guides that have been used for thousands of collaboration courses. Before we get started today, I'd like to quickly cover a few general WebEx reminders. If all attendees could please leave your audio on mute so that we can prevent any audio interference. Also, if you have any questions or comments during today's presentation, feel free to enter those into the chat box or the Q&A windows on the right side of your screen. We will address any and all questions at the end of the presentation. Finally, the slides and audio recording of today's webinar will be emailed out to all attendees within the week, so please look for that email from Fastlane Training. And now, Mr. Joey DeWiel.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to our presentation. Just to give you a minute, I'm going to just share my screen here so I can draw it directly on it. And there we go. So just to level set where we're at here, we've done a series of presentations on the CCNP collaboration exams. CIPTV1, CIPTV2, CT Collab, and CAPS. Now we're looking at CCNA collaboration certification, and I've sort of expanded this video to look at both CICD and the CIVND exam. So there's two exams that are part of CCNA collaboration, and we're going to have a quick look at both of those here in this presentation. Okay, so here is just a description of what CCNA collaboration certification is. It's the first collab certification in terms of difficulty. So you probably all know there's CCNA, which is roughly equivalent to administration, and then there's CCNP, which is basically an engineering certification, and then there's the CCIE, or expert level. So this will be the first level of certification for Cisco collaboration. Okay, so how can you get your CCNA collaboration certification? Well, if you're starting from scratch, we have two exams here, CICD and CIVND. And we're going to talk about these in some great detail. All of the exams that Cisco publishes have associated blueprints, and it's the blueprint that you need to understand in order to be able to pass the exam. So we're going to look at the blueprint for both of these this afternoon. What if you already have your CCNA Voice certification? Well, excuse me, if you have CCNA Voice, all you need to pass is CIVND 210-065. What if you've got an active CCNA video certification? So there used to be CCNA Voice and CCNA Video. This is being merged now into one CCNA collaboration certification. And if you have your CCNA Video, then in fact you also have your CCNA collaboration cert. So these are basically equivalent. And now when you recert, so these certifications are good for 3 years. At the end of the 3-year time, once your CCNA video is expired, you're going to have to migrate it over to CCNA collaboration. Okay, so a little bit of upfront. If you're starting from scratch, you need these two exams. If you have your CCNA Voice, you need this exam. If you have your CCNA Video, you're done. Well, what if you've taken some of the CCNA Voice exams? So these two were part of CCNA Voice. There's the ICOM and VI-VND. So if you passed ICOM, that counts for CICD. So it's as good as you have as good as taken the CICD exam if you pass the ICOM. And if you pass the VI-VND exam, that counts for the CI-VND exam. Okay, so if you're in the middle of your CCNA Voice and you've taken either of these, okay, well, that will count towards your CCNA collaboration certification. So here's what we're going to talk about in the webinar, the blueprints. And these blueprints, I'm going to change color here to make it a little bit more noticeable, right? The blueprints are vital. I put it up in red many times in these presentations. The official certification guides, studying those is not enough to pass these exams. Having the courseware in front of you, doing the course and doing the labs, that's not good enough to pass the exam. You really need to understand the material on the blueprint. Then we're going to look at study materials and how to find them. We'll talk a little bit about study methods and the effort required. Okay, so the first thing to look at is CI-VND. Okay, what's on the exam here? Okay, so this is the overview page. All of these exams have web pages that describe the exam. There's an overview, which we see here. There are exam topics, and this is the blueprint. So that's very useful. There are suggested study materials, and then there's some practice tests. So we have this URL, which I'm going to push into chat. And to do that, I have to actually find that. There we go. So I'll put that into chat so you can get that, and it'll be easy for you to navigate to the site. So this is the overview for CI-VND. Okay, I'm not sure if I went to the right page. Just give me 1 second here just to be sure where we're at. Yeah, okay. So we're looking at CI-VND, and we're looking at the CI-VND blueprint. Okay, so I've given you the link to the web page for CI-VND so we can see the overview. All right, what we're going to look at now is the exam topics or the blueprint. So I've navigated to that tab, and if you've got that link, you can navigate to the tab as well. We'll just show you here, right? So CI-VND exam, right? Exam topics. And we can see down below all of the topics, and we can look at the detail for each of these topics. So very easy to find out what's on the exam. Finding the right study material, that's a little bit more difficult, okay? But what we'll look at first is what's on the exam. So here's the high-level blueprint for CI-VND, right? So we have video concepts, endpoint configuration, troubleshooting and support, and conferencing concepts. You can see over on the right here, we can see the percentages of questions on the exam for each of these topics. So here we have 21% for video concepts, 32% for endpoint configuration, and so on. Okay, so again, exam questions are not restricted to content in either of the CI-VND courses or labs. Okay, the exam questions can come anywhere out of any of the blueprint topics. Let's just go into the blueprint in a little bit more detail here. Okay, so video concepts, these are basic, the basic building blocks of a video solution. So we've got things like media convergence, so that would be MCUs, conferencing devices. We've got video, media players, streaming video, recording and storage. You can be asked questions from any of these topics on the exam. That looks a little bit more intimidating than it is. Most of the questions for this particular topic does come from the courseware. Endpoint configuration. So here, the big thing is understanding Cisco's portfolio. So you have to know a little bit about the SX and EX and all of the variety of Cisco's video endpoints, right from mobile devices, right? We could even have a Jabber client running on a phone, desktop systems, right? So the newer products are the DX products. But there are, older phones. We have video phones like the 8800 and 9900 series, multi-purpose systems, even covered here, surveillance cameras and encoders, a variety of peripherals, cabling, for example, for doing cabling for far-end camera control, that sort of thing, and digital media players. A lot of environmental recommendations. If you're putting in an immersive telepresence system, you have issues with room lighting, room acoustics, right, room power, and so on. So there'll be questions on this on the exam. Endpoint configuration also includes, this is on the same, for the same 32%, right, of the questions, will include questions on implementing desktop endpoints and surveillance questions. So, questions on just what we need to do to configure a phone, for example, a pretty basic, to, what are we going to do to implement surveillance cameras? Something that a lot of people don't have a lot of experience with. But again, this stuff is mostly limited. The questions are mostly limited to Cisco's courseware in this case. Features and functions. So here we're looking at some conferencing capabilities, right? A variety of different issues with conferencing. So the telepresence server is Cisco's video conferencing server. This can be run as a VM, right? So we can run this in software. MCU is a media convergence unit. These are really hardware-based products. So we've got hardware and software products for conferencing, picture-in-picture, far-end camera control, multi-way versus multi-site. So these are some capabilities for conferencing. So all of these things also included in the exam. There's some questions on the exam, up to 31% of the questions on general troubleshooting and support. So endpoint issues can range from simple cabling issues all the way to what happens if we have an issue in the middle of a call, right? So we want to identify these issues and understand how to troubleshoot them. We want to be able to collect logs and status information, and we want to be able to do backups, right? Backups, restores, password recovery, those sorts of things. We also want to know a little bit about the command line interface, and we want to know a little bit about monitoring events and alerts. We've got some more questions basically on conferencing. Another 10% of the exam would be on conferencing. So a little bit more detail of multi-point control units, and the acronym for these is really MCU. So we're looking at MCUs. Describe conferencing features. You need to know, what cascading is, how everyone's pictures or how the video for all of the participants are laid out on the screen. And we need to know about the difference between a scheduled conference versus an ad hoc. So most of you should know an ad hoc is just when you decide you're going to create a three-way, for example. So a lot of times you hear this called three-way, right? So we want to understand about ad hoc conferences, scheduled conferences. Also, you need to know about Meet Me, a fundamental feature of the communications manager. So you're going to have to know scheduling, which comes with TMS, ad hoc, Meet Me. Ad hoc and Meet Me are, straightforward CUCM capabilities. Okay, so that was the CIVND exam. We'll now look at the CICD exam. So the CICD exam is 210060, and we'll look at that blueprint. Now, this link here, it's the same as the one that I've just posted, except we're going to replace CIVND with CICD. So you can navigate to this link and you can have a look at what's on the exam. Okay, so we're on the overview tab, and we're going to have a good look at the blueprint, which is on exam topics. Okay, so these exams, I should have mentioned this, for CIVND, they're almost always 75 minutes with, somewhere in this range to number of questions. Most of the exams require you to get 850 out of 1,000 possible points. And so you really have to do fairly well on these in order to pass. We've got recommended training here for these exams, implementing Cisco collaboration devices. This is a 5-day course. We'll talk about this shortly. And we have some Cisco press material here, the official cert guide and the official cert guide premium edition and practice test. We'll talk about all of these coming up. Okay, so this is the CICD blueprint. Okay, so again, we talked about the blueprint. Here's the high-level topics. Here are the percentages of the exam for each of those topics. CICD is much more focused on the base products. So CUCM, we've got connection, IM&P, IM and presence. So the CIVND is really video focused, right? What are the components of a video solution? CICD is getting much more into Cisco's collaboration architecture, their solutions for voice and video, voicemail, instant messaging, and it's really at the administrative level. Okay, so we're not looking at building a dial plan for the communications manager. We're more looking at adding endpoints and users, configuring endpoints and users, troubleshooting registration issues, those kinds of things. Okay, so the first part of this exam, describe the characteristics of a Cisco Unified Communications solution. Really, they should start saying collaboration. right, it becomes difficult to know what the difference is nowadays between a unified communications or a collaboration solution. We want to understand the components and their functions. So, we're looking at CUCM, connection, IM, and presence. We want to have a basic understanding of call signaling and media flows. And we want to know a little bit about quality, QoS. Okay, so 24%, and this is reasonably basic. Okay, so if you have got some experience with call manager administration, you can run through this, right? So how can we create a user? And we're looking at both CUCM and Call Manager Express, right? So we want to have a little bit of understanding of both of these products. We're looking at user accounts, right, for Call Manager and Unity Express. Endpoints, so really we're looking at phones, right? When they say endpoints here, they mean phones, and that includes, video phones from small to larger systems. We want to be able to understand that on the Call Manager and as well on Communications Manager Express. Class of service, right? We need to understand partitions and calling cert spaces. You're not going to get very far in Cisco certification if you don't understand partitions and calling cert spaces. And the equivalent concept for Call Manager Express is core, right? Class of restriction. So you need to know certainly how these things work. Managing directory numbers is always important, and you also need to know a little bit about some of these features. Extension mobility, call coverage, really we're looking at hunting, right? What capabilities we have, native presence, so we have BLF speed dials, right? And we have presence in our call directories, that kind of thing. And you also need to understand unified mobility remote destination configuration. So this last part here is single number reach, right? Mobile connect. Can you configure a user so that we can have a Jabber client, right? Can we add a Jabber client to the system? Do you know how to do that? You should understand that here. Verify that user features are operational. So how can you tell that things are working? 27% of the exam over here concerns configuring voice messaging and presence. And again, this is at an administrative level. Right, so we need to understand how to give a user a voicemail. Right, so we want to be able to create accounts for users in Cisco Unity Connection. We want to be able to modify them after they've been corrected. And we also want to be able to configure unified IM and presence. So this is basically our Jabber clients. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Just need a little drink. Okay, so maintaining communications manager systems, right? So this is all about management. So we're looking at generating CDR and CMR reports. That's not terribly tricky, but you do want to look at how you would collect these, right? Going into Cisco Unified Serviceability, we want to look at capacity and usage reports. You want to go and have a look at the unified reporting web pages, get a little bit familiar with those. Use the real-time monitoring tool to monitor system activities, right? We want to do some monitoring of our voicemail ports. Then you need to know some basic things like how to remove unassigned directory numbers and how to do a system backup. So this in itself, this is not such a bad 10%, right? So a lot of people find this piece a little bit easier than some of the others. And provide end user support. So we're looking at a little bit of troubleshooting here. You know, how can we verify PSTN connectivity, troubleshooting issues with phones, right? What about voicemail issues? You know, MWI doesn't turn on or it doesn't turn off, right? Some basic issues like that. Some QoS questions related to quality of service. Certainly we need to know how to reset devices, right? And you know, how to use phone apps as well, phone applications. That's included in the provide end user support. Okay, so I went through that pretty quickly. The objective of that was really to point you to those pages and get you to realize that you need to have a look at that blueprint. Just studying the courseware by itself is not necessarily enough to get you by the exam. And in fact, these exams are not so easy. I know one instructor, and he's not a Fastlane instructor, but he's an instructor with you know, one of the largest training partners. I've known him for 15 years. He did the original C-Voice course for Cisco, and does, you know, 30, 40 courses a year, right, out of the collab, collab portfolio. And he was telling me that he tried the CICD exam and he failed, right, which he found really surprising. I don't find that surprising because, you know, if you've been in the communications manager environment for a while and you focused, if your focus was on CUCM, and a lot of people's focus was there, and maybe connection, you really now in the collab world, you need to add in some video, right? You need to know about video or you're not going to pass these exams. And as well, you know, Jabber now, or IM in presence, is becoming larger and larger. So these tests, they're not easy, and if you've been around for a while and are just thinking about getting certified, it's actually harder, I think, to get your CCNA Collab than it was to get your CCNA Voice because of the, you know, the extra concepts that have been added. Okay, so having looked at the blueprint, and I've just told you these exams are not so easy to pass. You now need to figure out, what are you going to study, right? How are you going to study? So there's many topics on the exams. We looked at the blueprints, right? So, you know, for these blueprints, you could find thousands of individual documents, right? So what is it that you're going to do to study given them? Cisco has a variety of learning products, 5-day classes, e-learning with labs products. There's official certification guides. You know, that's what they're called for CCNA. Oh, sorry. For CCNP, they're called foundation learning guides. There's different versions of the products. The course is focused on the 10.x versions, other study material references, the 9.x versions. And then you could start looking at stuff like SR&Ds, deployment guides, administration and maintenance guides. You know, what is it you're going to look at? Well, we'll help you get started here. What training is available? How can you find it? How useful is it? Well, we suggest that you start with official Cisco training. And the courses, let's make that plural because we're talking about many courses here. The courses are the best place to start, but they are expensive, especially the 5-day courses. Cisco's now got eLearning with Labs products, and these products are, slipped off the table, much less expensive and provide a similar experience to the course. Okay, you can have access to the content, including the labs, for a year, and I'll talk about these products in a moment or two. The official certification guides, they are the least expensive option, but they don't include any labs. Okay, so what about courses? So I've gone to the overview pages for CICD and CIVND, and you can see the courses that are recommended. So that is a 5-day instructor-led course. ILT stands for instructor-led training. That is a 3-day self-paced. That's an e-learning product, and this also is 5-day ILT. So, I mean, that's a lot of training. That's 13 days of sitting in class for you to take all of these, 10 days of sitting in class and 3 days of self-paced. And, that will run you into many thousands of dollars if you go with the full course option. That is a good option, okay, but it is a tad expensive. So we've run through the CICD course. We talked about the certification guides recommended for the CICD course, and we have these courses recommended for the CIVND exam. The CIVND course, CIVND 1, it's a 3-day, a 3-day self-paced course that really gives you the knowledge to describe the characteristics of video solutions, assess the requirements for a successful implementation of a video solution. So this is really all about video. There's 2 modules. The first module looks at video conferencing and streaming fundamentals, and module 2 covers Cisco telepresence, endpoint environmental requirements and installation. So for me, I found this to be useful to get through that CIVND test. I'm going to put this link in here. I'm going to do some shameless marketing. We're actually at Fastlane. We are selling all of these are, where did my chat window go? All of these products, all of the e-learning products. So I just put a little note in the chat window. Okay, so this is reasonably cheap, right? $395, not so expensive. CIVND, implementing Cisco Video Network Devices Part 2. This is a 5-day course, right? And it's looking at giving you the skills to implement various Cisco collaboration endpoints. And we're looking mostly at video, right? So, a range of collaboration solutions, Cisco Business Video Solutions, right? Telepresence, multi-point conferencing, digital media players. This course is 5 days, and it includes 7 hardware labs and a number of discovery labs. And then we have the CICD course. Again, this is another 5-day course providing skills and knowledge that you need to implement UC solutions, primarily CUCM version 10.x. It's mostly administration, right? Administration of end users, endpoints, some features like extension mobility and unified mobility, as well as some maintenance. There is a goodly amount of labs here, if I can say that, a goodly amount of labs. There are a lot of lab exercises, 20 hours. It can actually be difficult to get through all of these exercises, in the 5-day class. Okay, so the 5-day courses are great. There's lots of material in there, right? We've got large and voluminous student guides, many labs. They're detailed. We've got real hardware and software. The instructor can add value and mentor. There are some drawbacks, though. They are expensive, these courses, right? In most cases, they're around $3,500. And you have to take 5 days off work to do the course. And it can be hard to stay focused for the 5 days of the course. 5-day courses are really built around the old model of the instructor has to get on a plane and fly to the location. The equipment is shipped to the location. The instructor sets it up on Sunday night or with the class on Monday, right? And then at the end of the week, everything gets set up or torn down, packed up, and sent on to the next site. So 5-day courses are great for logistics reasons in that sort of model, but not so great, for a normal human being trying to soak up the material. It's like a fire hose, right? You're trying to drink from a fire hose. It can be difficult. Okay. Labs are only available for the duration of the course. Okay. So one thing that I know for sure is that many instructors don't take these tests at all. Some instructors don't take any of the tests. So if you're really focused on certification, you might want to be sure that the instructor who delivers your course has actually taken the test. Now, I talk a little bit in here about Cisco's eLearning with Labs products because they're new and they're actually quite a good option for studying. So Cisco has released ELTs for CICD and for CID&D1. So for both of these classes. And they also have ELT for all of these CCNP collab courses. Now these will help, right? They don't guarantee that you pass because Cisco has said the material on the exam is not limited to what's in the course. Okay, so with these ELTs, they'll help you prepare. You get the same content as in the ILT course, the same student guide, and you get the same hands-on labs. Now, I'll talk about the hands-on labs in a second, because they're not exactly the same as what you have in the in-class ILT version. And you can use multiple devices, right? So, you can look at the student guide on your iPad or whatever kind of tablet you've got. Again, a little plug here. Fastlane is selling these e-learning products from Cisco. Now, this is not from CICD. This is a screenshot from CAPS. So I have to go in and I meant to update this with a screenshot from CICD. But you get the idea. This is the format of the e-learning. You've got the slides that you would normally see. Down below, we have the notes, right? So the courseware, the slides and student guide are exactly the same as in the ILT. The big difference is for instructor-led training, the instructor may or may not provide value add for individual slides. So if you've got a real instructor there, they could go to the whiteboard to explain something if everybody's confused. or not, right? So some instructors are good about whiteboarding and some are not. But for the most part, you will get some value add from being in an ILT class. For e-learning training, the notes for the slides are just read out, right? So, basically, the notes from the student guide, somebody reads them, as the slides are progressing. So it's not as exciting as you might like, right? But it's not so bad. So I don't want to oversell these. What I'd really like to do in this presentation is for you to understand what's there and how it compares, how these different options compare. Okay, so if you're looking at the student experience for a course, you have an instructor who can provide value add, and if it's a great instructor, you'll get great value add. For the ILT, there isn't any extra value add there. So this is an example of a lab, and again, I didn't get time to get a screen cap in here for CICD. This is from the CIPT V2 eLearning product, and you can see here, this is a real call manager that we have access to. It's not a simulation, right? We've got the same thing as if you had this, this call manager at this address. You can go to anything and configure whatever you want, right? Whether it works or not, is a whole other question, but everything is here and good for you to go. Okay, so one downside about this is these labs can take some time to spin up. It can take 20 minutes or so before the labs are ready to start. But you have them for a full year, 724. So you have to manage your time a little bit, right? So, just comparing these things, the instructor-led training, the labs use real hardware and software. For remote labs, if you're in a class with an instructor and it's WebEx-based, for example, then you're going to be using soft phones. Some training partners are remotely controlling 9900 series phones for their labs. These labs are available for only the 5 days. And, I say in many cases here, I'm thinking that I'm going to change this to, in most cases, students can't finish the labs in the time allocated. The Cisco labs, if you're doing a course where the training partner or learning partner is doing the Cisco labs, in some cases they're not so detailed. They don't give you all the exact steps, and it can take a bit of time for you to run through the labs. So I'm finding that most students aren't getting through all of the labs in these courses that are heavy on labs. Okay, the e-learning training, some labs use real hardware and software, so we just looked at this, right? Soft phones are used instead of hard phones. Okay, some of the software is simulated, right? So in some cases, for example, when you're configuring a router, the up and down arrows don't work, the tab, character doesn't work. You have to type the commands in full in order for it to work. So it's not as nice as if you've got real hardware in a real lab. So as drawbacks, on the other hand, they're available for a full year, right? It's 24/7. They can be run repeatedly. So there's some good and some bad here. Okay, there's some advantages to these e-learning labs over the ILT labs. I've already talked about the fact that the big issue here is for the instructor-led training, you just don't have that much time, right? So you end up running out of time trying to complete these labs. Whereas for e-learning, the labs are available for an entire year and can be run repeatedly. There's some more guidance here on study material, right? For each of these exams, there's a detailed list of what you can look at, right? So we can go and have a look at everything you can possibly review. Now, I've not done a detailed review of this yet. I've had time to go through the CCNP collab stuff, and it's almost time for me to have a look at this. I'm not sure how useful this is actually going to be. My experience with all of the CCNP collab exams is that the study material was of questionable use, right? So going through this page and looking at everything, is it useful or not? The experience that we've got with the CCNP collab exams was it mostly wasn't useful. It mostly wasn't helpful. And we are going to run through all of these at some point in the future. And it's a big list for both CID&D and CICD, and come up with our own recommendation. And we'll be putting a video on the website shortly. We're going to have a series of videos that go through this in a more clean fashion, right? And we'll look at all of these individual suggestions and see how valid they are. Same thing for, CICD. Some of these things where it says buy now, you need a premium subscription. Oh, sorry, I didn't put that out there very well. Premium subscription to learning at Cisco, and that's going for $11 a month. So I'm not sure whether, how useful these things will be and whether they're worth the $11. I looked at some of these that are actually pointing at Call Manager 4.1, right? Not 9 or 10. Some of these things look at software architecture and aren't so useful. What you could do is you can get a 7-day free trial. Get that free trial, have a look at some of these, and decide whether you want to actually pay for that subscription. But again, we're going to revisit this and try and add some more detail on the study material piece. What about these official cert guides, right? So here we have the official cert guide for CICD 210.060. And I confess I haven't actually bought this one because my experience with these is that they're just repackaging of the student guide from the course. So that if you have if you're taking the CICD course and you've got the student guide, then then you don't need this book, right? If you haven't taken the course or you haven't bought the eLearning, then this is a really cheap way of getting the material. Okay, an interesting thing when I went and looked at the prices here, the premium edition that includes the ebook and practice test, is much less, costs much less than the actual standard edition. So I think this was something like $79, and this was something like $39. So, if you're going to buy one of these, this one is cheapest. A downside to the Cisco Press books is that there are no labs, so that's a bit of an issue. Okay, what about other official documents? Now, let me just, on the left here, so let me just grab another little drink. If we're looking at training, in general, there's the 5-day course. There's Cisco's ELT with labs. Then there's the Cisco Press book. And these things are basically the same, right? So, you know, ELT with labs, same student guide. Same labs. Now, I mean, there's some restrictions in that. Some of it is simulated, so there's some downside on the one hand, but you have access to them for a year on the other hand. And then the Cisco Pressbook is basically the student guide from the course. So it's not like there's difference. There's a lot of different content here. It's almost like they've repackaged things differently. And if you look at the costs of these things, you're looking at about $3,500. Fastlane has these on sale for $995, and the Cisco Pressbook, I mean, it could be anywhere from $50 to $100. Okay, but you know, when you're looking at the bottom here, we have no labs. And I will tell you that Fastlane is going to have a promotion shortly where you'll get the ELT free with the course. So that should be coming soon. So this is just an overview. On the right, we have an overview of your training options, right? Some rough prices. On the left here, there's other official documents that you can look at: SR&Ds, administration guides, deployment guides, and so on. And there's also a lot of unofficial material. There's a lot of YouTube videos out there on a variety of Cisco collaboration topics. Some of them are quite good. I've actually done a bunch, and I think mine are quite good. So there's a lot out there that a lot of people have produced. It's our intent is to do a roundup of this for all of these exams. Okay, now that's coming. Looking at all of these exams for all of these courses turned out to be a larger job than we thought it would be, but we're making progress. Okay, and I also put a link in to where you can get Cisco Live presentations. Oops, let me just pop this link into chat. There's a lot of excellent presentations at Cisco Live. So I would encourage you to have a look at some of these. It's free, right? You can access them at this link. There's a guy named, let's just, Johan Krohn. Now, did I actually spell the name right? But he has a lot of dial plan presentations that are quite excellent. So to get a basic idea of communications manager dial plans and partitions and calling cert spaces, you can have a look at some of those presentations. Study methods. How should I study? Well, there's lots of options, right? Read and reread, take notes and summarize. You can practice doing labs. You can practice doing tests. So let's just have a quick look at this. Read and reread may be good for a first step, but problematic as a complete solution for most people. I know some people who read something and they memorize 90% of it from that first reading, and then the exam's easy. I'm not one of those people, right? I can read something. I used to be able to read something 3 times and know it reasonably well. Now I have to read it 10 times. So it's a good first step, but not really a complete solution. We've started looking at building crib notes, and we've started making some crib notes for various topics for various exams, and we're going to roll some of those into our courses as we get them built out. We're not aware of any CCNA practice labs other than the actual courses. However, the e-learning products, I mean, they are a good place to start, and they're not so expensive, right? Especially compared to the courses themselves. Any rack that you would rent for doing labs, they're to get a rack for $10 an hour. That's really cheap, right? So if you want to do 40 hours of lab time, if you find a rack that's got some CCNA collaboration, I really should have had the word collab in there, right? Because there's a lot of CCNA practice labs out there for CCNA route switch. The e-learning option, it gives you reasonably priced labs. I think that just for the lab experience alone, that those products are worth the money. What about practice tests? Okay, if we look at practice tests, that's how a lot of people prepare for exams, right? If you're doing your LSAT or your MCAT, you download practice exams and you run them over and over again. The Cisco Learning Network has a tab here for practice, but there really aren't many questions. There's 8 CICD practice questions and 7 for CID and D2. And, getting 100% on these does not mean you're ready for the test. So this is of limited usefulness, these practice questions. You can certainly do the practice questions in the instructor-led and e-learning courses and in the Foundation Learning Guide, right, or the Cisco Press Book, and you should always do those if you have them. If you do an internet search, you can find many practice tests. However, none of them are approved, and using them to prep would be considered cheating, right? If the questions on the practice test are copies of the real test questions, and as well, right, you won't have the job skills that you need. And for sure, some of these practice tests that you can download, they're basically copies of the real test questions. So, that's certainly cheating. Crib notes, and this actually is a typo. We haven't built these for CICD yet or CID&D. But for our studying, this is what we've been doing. It's hard to figure out exactly how to insert these into a class, so we're working on that now as well. Basically, crib notes, this is looking at trunking between a communications manager and a VCS. So we summarize the steps, right, that we need on the CUCM and the steps on VCS. Right, and then for individual steps, right, for the SIP profile for devices, what are particularly important things that we're configuring there. So we have a call out on the right. So steps and important values. And we are now running through and building some of these out. Our plan is to have some of these for every course and run through, just the process of building summaries and having somewhat of a good discussion on the exams in the individual classes. How much time should you spend preparing? Okay, if you have some experience with CUCM administration and you've done some troubleshooting of registration issues, then you have a start. Right, but you're going to have to know about Unity, Unity Connection, right, and Call Manager Express. So those guys are also on the test, and now we're seeing IM&P as well. The other issue here is video, right? You need to know a lot about general video technology and Cisco's video endpoints. Unfortunately, some of this material, some of these things are end of life already and they're still on the exam, right? So, you have to study some technologies that you might never, ever get your hands on. And it's difficult to know when you're ready. It really is. You almost have to at some point just say, I'm going to take the exam and see how it goes. Okay, so this is what we looked at in this session. I'm sorry I went through this really quick, but we've only had an hour. There's more detail that we would like to add, and we will add that in on videos on the website as soon as we can. Okay. We're enhancing our courses to include exclusive exam prep content, right? So similar to this presentation, right? Understand the blueprint. We'll have some more detail about what to study, and we'll take a little bit of time looking at, techniques for summarizing, right? We can customize courses to meet your specific training requirements. I just wanted to put that up there as well. And thank you for attending. I hope we've got a little bit of time for Q&A, so we'll send this back to Lee.
Awesome. Thanks, Joey. We always have time for some Q&A. Our first question, we had a couple come through on our chat line. Is there a time limitation that you must complete the second exam after passing the first?
That's a good question. And I don't know if there is a time limit, but generally these things expire after 3 years. So without actually without knowing for sure, I would say probably 3 years, right? That would be my guess. I could look that up and get an answer, but I don't know how I would get that back to people. But you know what? I can include that in the videos when we add them to the website.
Terrific. And for anyone who's unfamiliar, all of these webinars will be broadcasted on our website on the appropriate pages. The next question is, what about building a CCNA home lab?
Well, you can build a simple lab with just a couple of call manager virtual machines and some IP communicators. So that's something that's fairly easy to do. But as you want to expand your lab, you want to include Unity Connection, IM and Presence. If you want to look at HA or high availability, it becomes more and more expensive, right, to put these things together. Okay, and our last question just came in. On the training courses, do we get to play with the Cisco SX and DX products? No. Well, okay, so all of the courses except for CIVND 1, are really virtual, right? So you're looking at IP communicator and Jabber clients or remote controlling a 9900 phone. But the very first, the CIVND course, the first one, the second one, where's that course here? I still have the ball, right? Yes. The CIVND course, and you know what? I've got the CAG here, so I'll just actually show you what's in the official course. I have the CAG here, and we can look at, now this will give you the official list of equipment. We have the Unified IP Phone 9971, Cisco DX650, the Cisco SX20 Quickset with Cisco Telepresence Touch Panel, Cisco Edge 340 DMP. So that's the official Cisco courseware. Depending on your training partner, you know, they may or may not have deployed this exact set of equipment. So that's what Cisco has specified, and that's what you should find in most, you know, in most, and this is what we have for Fastlane. So you should find this in most of these learning partner courses. But I can't guarantee that, right? Because a lot of learning partners make modifications to the deployment of these classes. Okay?
So just as a follow-up, one more comment coming in from the same individual. Said, I only ask because I read the CIVID Cisco Pressbook, and as it expects some knowledge of these products, it's going to be hard to answer questions without access to this kit.
Right. And that, you know, that's certainly true. So if you want to get your hands-on, right, now you actually need to have ILT training, right, as opposed to remote training. So you want to go to a classroom, take CIVND2, where you're in the class and you have all of this particular equipment right there in front of you, so you can have a look at it. Okay, so you can take a screen cap here of this. Let's make it a little bigger. And you can see what's actually in the class for the CIVND2 lab topology.
All right. Terrific. Thanks as always, Joey. And I want to thank everyone for attending today's webinar. Just as a reminder, this webinar session has been recorded and will be made available to all attendees. You'll receive an email within the next few days with a link to the recorded session, so be on the lookout from Fastlane Training. If you are interested in Fastlane and what we have in terms of training or certification options, or just have any further questions, please visit our website at www.fastlaneus.com. All of our terrific promotions, as well as our Fastlane loyalty program, can be found on our site. Again, a huge thank you to our presenter, Joey DeWiel. Hope everyone has a great afternoon.